Hello, I'm Riley, and this is the Diegetic Advancement Podcast. Hello, welcome. Today on the show, we've got a call from Daniel with some advice on building groups, and I'm going to talk about some recent gaming I've been doing. No updates on the Forbidden Lands game as yet, but expect that next week. And of course, we'll close out with some content recommendations. Okay, strap yourselves in. Here's Daniel from the Bandits Keep. Take it away.
Hey Riley, Daniel from Bandits Keep. I feel like I have called in, but I don't think I have. Like I keep wanting to call in because you're listening to your episodes and there's a lot of extra excellent stuff. But then I'm like, I don't know if I did or not. So if I'm repeating myself, forgive me, but I don't think I actually did call in about this. And it was a while ago. You were asking about or discussing the idea of building like long-term groups, both in person and out of person, in person and out of person, in person and online. And I have some experience with that. I mean, I am in an in-person group that started about 2016, I believe, and we still play. During the pandemic, obviously we played online because we couldn't play in person, but we've played weekly for the most part since then, and run multiple campaigns. And the group is not the same people that it started with. Some people have come, some people have gone. But over time, we've definitely built up a pretty strong, steady group. And I think some of the most important things beyond just like becoming friends, right? I think that if you play with people and somehow you're not going to be friendly with them, like you don't become friends, you just sit down, you play, you don't ever discuss anything outside the game, that might in the long run not be good. I'm kind of a private person, so I don't necessarily sit down with somebody and start telling them my whole life story. I don't necessarily ask people for their life story. But over time, when you play with people, you do become friends with them and you learn about them. And I think that helps keep you together as a friend group, even if not a gaming group. So if somehow the gaming slacks off a bit, you're still doing things. Like we do things outside of gaming, right? In a week or so, I'm going to a play with a couple of people I game with. Anyways, so what I would say, though, is consistency is probably the key, though, especially in the beginning. You want to lock down time to play, which means that you have to find people that are committed to doing that. And the thing that is important, I think, and this is a mistake that I made actually in other groups that I've had that have not been successful, is that in the beginning you have to be as focused on that as possible. To the extent that you might lose some people. Then those people that aren't going to be reliable or can't come every week or that kind of stuff, if you let that be a regular thing early on in the group, that sets a standard that the rest of the group feels like, oh yeah, we can just come and go when we want. So in the beginning, like it's pretty important to make sure everybody shows up a lot. And if you've got a person that's just not consistent, it might be a good idea to just not have them be part of the group. That sounds harsh, but I think that consistency is key, especially in an in-person group. There's something about meeting in person that people want to feel they've got that consistency. They've set aside that time to travel to a location and be somewhere. An online game, if you're playing for a couple hours, you could literally be hanging out with your family while they're watching a movie. You step in, you play the game, you come back. It's like you were never gone. But if you're going to go someplace to play for 2 hours, it really is a process. So I think that's it. I mean, I know I've spent a long time on that one topic, but I think that's key. The other thing that's important is to vary things up. Make sure you're listening to the group. Make sure you're checking in with them and seeing what they're into. If you are the person who started it and you're the GM, forever GM, whatever you want to call it, don't feel like that always has to be that way. If somebody wants to run something, assuming everybody's into it, let them, try different systems, mess around, do one-shots in between the campaign, keep it fresh, but don't start off that way. Start off consistent and get them locked in, right? Now, as far as online is concerned, I think online in some ways is almost the opposite. I still think consistency is important, but I don't think that online is a good place to set up an open-ended, we're just going to play forever. I think that people online are looking for, at least in my experience, shorter experiences. One-shots, 2 sessions, 3 sessions, 5 sessions. People that are strictly playing online are generally playing that way because they don't have the ability to lock in a schedule. This isn't, obviously I'm generalizing. They don't necessarily have that ability to lock in that schedule. So they're playing kind of when they can, right? They're the person that can't leave the house for 4 hours, but can jump into your 2 hour game by like literally like stepping out of the room playing and stepping back. They're the person that might have to leave for 5 minutes in the middle to do something. And in a way, you need to be okay with that, especially in online games, because I think that's normal for that kind of stuff. Now, eventually, you may build a group that really wants to play consistently, and I have that now. Probably from just shortly after my in-person group started, I started playing with some of the people, not all of them, that I play with currently online. And we, over time, again, people have come, people have gone. Sometimes the group expands, sometimes it gets more slim. But we played every single week, sometimes multiple times a week, because multiple people were GMs. At one point, I was running 3 campaigns, and not everybody in this larger group was part of it, but they could have been. And it was going on, and the discussion was happening in the larger group. So if somebody was like, oh, yeah, I can't play on Saturdays because that's the day I have to work, but 3 other people could play on Saturdays, and I'm running that game on Saturday, the people that couldn't play are hearing about the thing, and they're excited, right? They're like, oh, that's so cool. You guys are playing that game. So community is almost, you're building like almost a larger community when you're playing online. And that community is kind of has more of a drop in, drop out vibe, in my experience, if you want to keep it around, because it's hard to get people to commit every single week at a certain time online. At least that's what I've found. I'm sure other people have had different situations, but I do feel like being consistent is important. Now, there was some discussion about like, how do you get them to play when you're not there? If you have to not be there as a GM, right? That I couldn't tell you. I mean, they wouldn't be able to do it as far as my in-person group because we play in my space. But for my online group, that does happen because everybody is a GM. So many times somebody will say, oh, such and such can't run today. Let's do a one-shot. So I think that works. The in-person group, though, as far as, when I'm not there, they wouldn't be able to play together unless they went somewhere else, which might just be too much of a hassle unless they knew they had time to set it up. However, the idea of playing other games and stuff if the full group can't show up is something I'm trying to embrace. I've brought a couple different things to play when people aren't there. Things that you can play quickly that don't necessarily need to have a lot of, that don't take a long time, I guess. So outdoor survival is one of the things that I have in my kit. And what's nice about that is we're already using it for D&D, right? So we already have an idea of how it works. The other thing that I have is Melee from Steve Jackson games. It's part of the fantasy trip. It's almost like a little miniatures battle game. We haven't tried that one yet, but I think that would also be good. It's just a quick thing. You can make your own characters. You can have fun, just have little combats, and you can keep the characters and have them grow over time. So you could almost start a mini campaign with it in between things if you really wanted to. So this is a very long message to say that I think consistency is key, whether you're running online or in person. And just checking in constantly with the group and also being aware that a long-term group might be, start with 5 people, but in the course of 10 years of playing it, there might be 15 people involved in it. And the group that you have at the end of the time might only involve 1 or 2 of the people that started because people come and go, people change. And that's okay. As long as you can keep a good base going. Recruit when the group needs it. Don't just, say, well, we don't need anybody else. We're good friends. We don't want anybody else here. You got to keep growing the group because people will change and move and stuff. It's just the nature of, the world. Anyways, super long message. I'll leave it at that. And I'm sure there's other things I could call in about that you've talked about that have been great. But that was one thing I thought was a super interesting subject. So there it is.
Hey, Daniel. Thank you for the kind words and for calling in with some good advice. I appreciate you sharing your personal experience as well. It's often very helpful. Becoming friends, your first point. Yeah, totally. You can play games, but if you're not there to be social and make friends, I don't think you're going to build a strong group. I've been thinking about my ritual of play, and it's certainly not as strict or structured as that makes it sound, but having time set at the start of a session to just chat and then get into the game at a later point. If you just jump straight in and expect to just be on and playing the game, you kind of avoid the opportunity for that, and then people just go home and don't get to know each other. Or if you're already friends, you've missed a point where you can check in and make sure people are doing good and just find out what people are up to. So that's something I've been considering, and that's good advice. And then your comments on consistency and commitment and the differences in person and online are really interesting as well. I totally agree. It's very difficult to carve out consistent time to travel, play for 3 to 4 hours, and then travel back, consistently every Monday or Sunday or whatever it might be. And if you've cut that time out, you've managed to do that, and then it's semi consistent. Sometimes you're canceling. You could be doing other stuff, but you've turned down other stuff because you've blocked that time out. But you could have actually said yes because it ends up not happening. That's super frustrating, and then people are not going to want to commit. And I know I'm the same. If I've carved that time out, that's a commitment I've made, and I prefer that to go ahead. Interesting that like online play in your experience has it is a less of a commitment, but people are also looking for less commitment in your experience at least, where they're looking for more structured, shorter term play. That's an interesting observation, and at least anecdotally from what I see online, that seems to check out. My goal, I think, is to build a gaming group, not just a group that plays games together. Instead of having just a single GM and a few players, I want multiple GMs and many more players than you could possibly be in a single game or session. This way, you've got multiple games going on. People can get different experiences, play with different people, but hopefully each time you sit down and play or run, you're getting, what you're getting. Right? There is some consistency, even though there's a larger group. But first, I've got to build a single group, which I have been doing, and it's been going well. But I'm making some changes, so this is a good point to segue into talking about what gaming I've been doing. But advice like that, Daniel, is invaluable, and thank you again for the call. Daniel is from the Bandits Keep, and all his details will be in the show notes. Okay, so I started a group playing DCC in person, and it had been going very well. Me and another player, though, have young children, and that comes with time commitments. And recently, at least on my end, lots of sickness. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, but I am sick again. So that's partially the delay in this week's episode. But this means that games have been cancelled more regularly, which is why I love a solution to when the GM is not there, or the games have been moved online. So the first change I'm making is to swap the group to primarily online play, because that's really what it's become, and we'll still try and get some in-person gaming in, but that will be the exception. This way, expectation is matching the reality. Also, whilst I've had a great time with DCC, and I think the players have too, I need a simpler system, slightly simpler. One with a little bit more procedural support too would help. This will let me prep easier and hopefully get more gaming in a shorter time of day. I haven't decided what game we're moving to yet. An OD&D clone is high on the list. Into the Odd is as well. But what I'll talk about next is put Shadow Dark on the list also. So we'll see. But as Daniel mentioned in his call, I will also be running a more structured game, a sandbox with a goal, let's say. So players have freedom to go about what they want to do, explore what they want, but there will be a driving force and a defined end. I think of a small town. There's a bunch of dungeons and interconnected stuff going on, but there's a dragon somewhere, and that's the threat. So when they kill the dragon or deal with the dragon or whatever, the game is over. At least that season is over. You continue on at another point, but that's the plan, and I'm going to spend the next few weeks fleshing something out, a setting, and whilst we finish up with the DCC, and then dive in. Hopefully this is the extra kick of energy that will continue to push that group forward, get a few more players in, and get that consistent, strong group being built. As I said, that's probably going to kick off in the next few weeks. We're going to continue playing in the meantime, but we'll make that swap and those changes. And so hopefully I'll be providing an update on that when it happens. Okay, so why did I mention Shadow Dark? Well, and this feels very weird to say, and I'm only realizing it as I record. I played in my first OSR game as a player this morning. If you don't count play-by-post, that is, which I have had some really good OSR play-by-post experiences. I had the pleasure of playing in John of the Red Dice Diaries Barrow Maze game Run with Shadow Dark, alongside Jason, Colin, and Pete, who were amazing, as was John. and I don't want to talk too much about the game, what happened in it, other than to reiterate it was a blast and definitely worth the 3 a.m. wake up. But I did want to talk about Shadowdark just a little bit. This is what I liked. It felt very intuitive and easy to play. I read through the rules very quickly. Looked at my character sheet. I understood it. Of course, that as I believe Colin said after the game, it's probably at least partially attributed to it being an OSR D20 system. And now I'm putting words in his mouth. If you've played one, you've played them all. Characters were very easy to roll up, partially thanks to a good online creator. But I appreciated the slight randomness and choices between ancestries and talents, which didn't alter things drastically or add too much complexity, but made one fighter feel different from the next, or one priest from the next. And the quick start rules are clean, concise, and free. Additionally, I'm considering it for my game is for the reason that it's a little bit of an easier transition both to and from 5th edition, I think, or more modern D&D. I have new players who I don't want to turn away from 5e or make it harder for them to find another group. And I also want to attract players who might only be playing 5e currently. Now, my gripes with the system at this stage are purely theoretical and aren't worth sharing here, at least before I've really played some more. So that's all I'll leave it at. Hopefully I get another chance to play with John and the other players. As I said, I had a great time getting to play as a player. It's very hard to find a OSR game in where I live currently. So I was glad for the experience. And thank you very much if John or the players are listening. Okay, and we are on the verge of running along, so let's and we're very late in getting this episode out, so let's quick fire some content recommendations, and then let's end it there. And isn't that a strange place for my microphone to die? I've swapped over to the phone. Hopefully I still sound pretty good. Maybe I'll even sound better, but I definitely sound different. Anyway, back to those content shoutouts. Firstly, we have Spencer from Keeper of the Borderlands, who put an episode out on false starts in solo gaming. Interesting thoughts there. Hopefully, not a precursor to my attempts at solo gaming. Joe from the Dekahedron podcast interviews Chris Goneman of Basic Fantasy, who is a really interesting person and a really interesting project. So really enjoyed that conversation. Go check that out. Todd over at Hexed Press released a live example of play with Daniel from Bandits Keep, going through the OSE exploration procedure, trying to explain going through it as they played. If that's something that might interest you, go check it out. All right, that is it for this week. As I said, I've got some things planned for next. Hopefully, I've got time planning ahead so that it'll also come out on time. But talking about my Forbidden Lands game, I've brought up some characters, so I'll talk about those and perhaps even start a little bit of play. I've got some changes coming to my gaming, but I won't be able to talk about those for another few weeks. But we'll see what other thoughts fancy me for next week. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Bye for now.
I'd love to hear your feedback. You can reach me via Spotify, SpeakPipe, Discord, or email. Details, along with everything I've talked about today, are in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.